Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each week I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm so excited today to have my friend Ray on here with me today. Hey, man, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody who you are.
Thanks a lot for having me, Todd. I'm so excited when I got that message for me to be on with you. And so just a little bit about myself. My name is Ray. I'm here in Deep South Texas. I am in my first year of principalship at a fine arts academy. Just a little tidbit, I attended this same school as a child. So coming around full circle, I am back at my old stopping grounds. I'm so excited to start off my year at my school. Not necessarily how I pictured being my first year as an admin during a pandemic. But here we are, and I'm so excited.
Well, hey, man, I'm excited for you. I know you're going to do some great things. And so, any conversation I have on here, I always start with the same question. And that is, when you were a kid dreaming of what you were going to be when you grew up, does it align at all with what you're doing now?
Not at all. Not at all. I never saw myself being in education. My mom was a school teacher for 38 years. And I never thought I'd be going down this route. Ever since I was a little boy, I always told myself I was going to be either somewhere in the police officer, or going towards the medical field. And here I am in education going on 8 years and no turning back. I'm excited. I feel like this was my calling to be in education. My sister's also a teacher, and my wife's a teacher. So it only felt right to continue on within that educational route. So it's been quite the journey, to say the least.
So what was that turning point where you realized that this was the path you were meant to be on?
I graduated college and I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I went for my master's degree. And it wasn't until then I came home and I opened up the newspaper and I saw an ad for a Teach Project grant that was affiliated with my local university. So I took the plunge, and they were looking for teachers in high needed areas. Down here in the Valley, obviously, is one of those areas. So within the course of 2 days, I filled out my application. I was one of the candidates selected to do that. So I was under a Teach Project grant for 3 years. And I started here in the same district where I'm currently at. And I had a blast.
I love that so much because two of my teachers that I absolutely loved had very similar stories about how they fell into education. So I love hearing that for you as well. Well, at some point, though, you decide that, hey, administration might be a good route for me, too. What was that like? What was kind of pushing you that direction?
Well, over the course of 3 years that I was at my campus, we saw a different administrator every single year. There was no consistency and so no foundation. And I thought to myself, I want to be somebody who's able to change that culture, not necessarily at the school that I was at, but just in general. So after much thinking and contemplation, I went ahead and took the plunge because I saw the inconsistencies that were there. The kids was an injustice for our kids. They had no familiarity with the administration. So every year there was a different principal or a different assistant principal or a different dean that was walking through those doors. And I felt that they needed some sort of voice for them.
I love that so much. And, and I love, too, that you mentioned at the opening that you also now get to be principal at a school you attended as a child, which I think is one of the coolest things. But I'd love to know, overall, what kind of student were you? Like, what was school like for you? Did you enjoy going to school? Was it difficult? Were you in trouble all the time? I know you said your mom was in education, but what was school like for you?
I think kind of all the above. I know with my mom being a teacher, I know what I could get away with and what I could not get away with. She was only a phone call away. Although we were at different campuses, like I mentioned, she had her eyes and ears inside that school. So anything that we did, she knew within 5 minutes or when we got home from school, what did you do? So, but for the most part, I thought I was a good student. We took education fairly. It was a priority in our family. Yeah. Growing up, my grandparents immigrated from Mexico and they wanted to live the American dream. And so they had the dream of, obviously, my mom and my aunts and uncles to go to college to get that higher education. So every single one of my aunts and uncles went to college. They got the degree. Some went to Ivy League, some were in West Point. Some of them went through the Air Force. And she pushed that down to us. All four of my siblings, including myself, are all higher educated. We all have our degrees. Yeah. And so it's something that I want to instill into my own family as well. that education is the key to your future. It is that door opener to be successful.
You know, and you're so right. And I love that you're the voice down there getting to do that, because you're the kind of person that they'll exactly listen to, because you went to that school, you've been there, they know that you understand them. And so I'd love to know too, though, you know, this year has been unlike any other overall, and it's your first year being a principal and everything like that. It's like, you know, what do you feel like is one of the biggest lessons you've learned this year?
Everything between today we almost had to evacuate my campus for a potential gas leak. So having to call everybody, our directors were at my campus, and they, you know what, don't stress, it's going to happen. But just to add to this crazy year, you can add this from power outages, from not having adequate staff due to the pandemic. I mean, it's just one of those things that you keep on adding. You have to adapt to the situation at hand. None of us were expecting to be in this situation exactly 1 year ago today. But a lot of the administrators, including myself, who I follow on Twitter and social media, that we're continuing with our job into ensuring that our kids are safe, that more importantly, the social emotional well-being of our kids, because this is taking a huge toll on a lot of our kids, especially down here in the Rio Grande Valley, where we're right by that Mexican border. Mm-hmm. Sometimes our students were stuck over there in Mexico or weren't able to cross back and forth because of the pandemic. And so they've had lost loved ones within the pandemic as well. So having that availability of someone to talk to, shout out to all of our staff down here in my district for doing that. My counselor has been doing an amazing job in supporting our kids. And I think the biggest thing I learned is just adaptability. Everybody has their own story to tell. Everybody has their own story that they are currently living. So being there for not only for your kids, but for your staff as well, I think is very, very important.
You know, Ray, I love that you share that. And, you know, you mentioned something in there too that I'd love to get your perspective on. And, you know, being in a border town, I feel like you get a very unique perspective on the idea of refugees or immigrants or everything like that. That's very different than sometimes the way they can be portrayed politically by the media, whatever, because you're there, you're in the midst. These ideas and names have faces attached to them, and you get to know them. And so for people who might be listening or watching today, you know, what is something that you wish more people knew or understood about what it's like being in a border town?
And I think it's very different. You don't know until you actually live there. Like you said, we're right here, literally 15 minutes away from the border. At my old campus, you can literally see the crossing bridge into Mexico from my classroom window. So we're literally living right there, and seeing the influx of students come in, seeing the influx of these refugees come in. They just want a better life. And I get that. And we need to be able to work with them regardless of your political affiliation. They are human beings. They want that outlet for help. And we as Americans have that to assist them. Right. Regardless, yes, we may have our own thoughts of the way they're coming in. But at the end of the day, my family immigrated to the States exactly the way they did. And here I am, successful, being a productive citizen in society. So it is possible. It is possible, regardless of what is portrayed in the media. It may not always necessarily be positive or the true story. But I can tell you right off the bat, these kids and these families coming over are the most humble people that you will ever meet. I mean, they may not have much, but they're willing to open up their doors. Sure, here's some lunch for making your way out here, or here's the shirt off my back. They are willing to do whatever they can to ensure that they are successful and that the kids' needs are being met.
You know, I love what you shared there, because I've got to experience some of that as well. And you just hit the nail on the head. And there was so much good stuff right there in that answer. I loved it. But, you know, Ray, switching gears just a little bit, you know, you're active on social media, connecting with others, learning along the way. And I know sometimes one of the pitfalls of social media can be that comparison game where you start to see what other people are doing and wondering, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right stuff? And it starts to let this doubt begin to creep in on us. And so I'd love to know from you, how do you keep doubt from taking root in your own life?
And you bring up a good point. We're always trying to compare ourselves to somebody else or somebody else's school. And in reality, we each have our own school to look at. Everybody's needs are different. Just because it worked at somebody else's school doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work at your school. You have to play it by ear, and you have to take risks. You have to be a risk taker to see if that's going to work. There's so many people that I followed. I mean, when you were a principal at your school, I mean, just even reading Kids Deserve It, I got a lot of my ideas from that book, and they work. They work, and I think our towns are pretty much similar where we, as far as population are concerned. And so, like I mentioned, you cannot hold back and take that risk. I think that's very, very important. If it fails, then you learn from it and how you can adjust yourself to ensure, once again, it goes back to the kids. You wouldn't be here in this profession if it weren't for the kids. And oftentimes teachers have that stigma, oh, they're in it just for summer vacations off and stuff like that. Case, yes. And so we're working year round. My teachers are working their butts off. Even during holidays, I'll get texts or emails, sir, can I do this? And yeah, I mean, by all means, they're working around the clock.
Yeah. You're so exactly right. Well, Ray, when I look at our paths that we've taken and when you look at the man you've grown into today, who's somebody that's played a really big role in your life? And I know if there's any of your family or friends who are listening, please don't be offended if your name is not the name he mentions, because I know there are many, many people who play a role in who we become. And so when you are reflecting, though, who's somebody that you're like, yeah, this name definitely comes to mind?
Or off the bat, my grandma. She was my driving force, regardless of what I went through, my ups and downs. She was always my biggest cheerleader. And I know that you mentioned that in your book, as well as having that cheerleader. And she was always my go-to person. And regardless of what happened, she was there to back me up 100%. So she was my biggest motivator. And so I know that I'm hoping that I'm making her proud right now. She's no longer with us, but I still feel that presence with her on a daily basis. And she's still one of the biggest influences that I currently have. My wife and my son, obviously, right now are my biggest motivation for that as well. And so just being able to come back to them and be that example for my son.
Yeah, I love that so much. Well, Ray, as we begin to wrap up, I always love to end on the same question, and that is, if people are checking this out today and they only walk away with one thing, what is your one thing for them?
I think the biggest thing, you got to dream big and work hard. There's nothing too big that you can accomplish. Just have faith in yourself and surround yourself with good people. I mean, with that, your dreams will come true. I mean, I believe I'm living proof of that, coming from a small border town and going away for college, and here I am back full circle at my old elementary school. It's a dream come true.
I love it. Well, Ray, I have been looking forward to this conversation. I have loved getting to chat with you today. So thank you for coming and spending a few minutes with me on Tell Your Story.
I appreciate you for having me, Todd. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining another episode. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your stuff. It's there. I hope today's conversation with Ray has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.